first time that I had his little tiny hand in mine. What you can't tell from that slide is that his whole hand wrapped around this little teeny tiny part of my finger, because he was that itty bitty tiny. Now he's crawling all over the place, and it's a very different scenario. But he certainly inspires me to do the work that I do, and to want to make a difference in the world still, and all of these kind of things that are internal inspiration for me. But everybody has something different in their lives that motivates and inspires them. Some of you may find something in common with that, some not. Some of you might be inspired not to have one of those. This image right here actually shows some of the ways that I've been able to inspire people without words. I wasn't able to speak the language of the children that you see on the slide up there. That was during a tour in Afghanistan for a year. And I had an interpreter, but I knew bits and pieces of the language, but not enough to have an entire conversation. But one thing that I found very quickly inspired this audience was bubbles. Something as simple as a 50-cent little jar of bubbles. That's what inspired these kids. So I had a few come out. What are those magical floating things all over the place? And then before long, I had just masses of children running up, just dancing, and they were just, it was amazing. It kind of reminds me, okay, embarrassingly enough, as an adult, what it was like when I saw fireflies for the first time, and they lit up. And that's what these children were like. They were just so excited. They ran up, and they wanted to see what was going on. But so children that maybe otherwise I would not have gotten to engage with, this actually opened them up and inspired them to get to know us. Some more on motivation too. So these kids obviously were motivated by something quite simple. But people are either intrinsically or extrinsically motivated to do different things. The cognitive evaluation theory breaks down intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic, people are motivated by achievement, responsibility, and competence. They're motivators that come from the actual performance of a task or a job. They're actually interested in the task or the work. They take pride and ownership in the work itself. Whereas extrinsically motivated people, it's more pay, promotion, feedback, working conditions, and things that come from a person's environment controlled by others. These children, it was pretty extrinsic at the moment, at that point. Intrinsically motivated individuals will perform for their own achievement and satisfaction. But here's the catch. If they come to believe that they are doing some job because of the pay or working conditions, or some other extrinsic reason, they actually begin to lose their motivation. So kind of understanding who you're working with, who you're talking to, and what it is that is motivating them can make a huge difference in whether you are going to be able to persuade them regarding what you are wanting to get across. I think, if you will, if we had George Lucas, and he was never able to inspire the financial backing of Star Wars, or Jonas Salk, who maybe he was unable to inspire others of the significant importance of his polio vaccine. And there's obviously even more modern day things. Star Wars, we're all starting to get excited about. But what happens if he would have never been able to make that first movie because he couldn't inspire his audience of people to financially back him? So hopefully we can continue talking a little bit about giving you guys the knowledge, the tools, techniques to inspire an audience across any of your speaking situations. With any luck, you guys can be inspired yourself. And I would be curious to know, but I will not ask every single individual in here, who is intrinsically motivated versus extrinsically motivated. And there are also other reasons people are motivated. I will list a few. This is not an end-all be-all list, because I would go on probably for a book. People are motivated by acceptance, or the need for approval. Curiosity, the need to learn. Eating, the need for food. That's starting to sound like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Family, the need to raise children or to have some sort of familial support. Honor, the need to be loyal to the traditional values of one's clan or ethnic group, or whatever belong to. Idealism, the need for social justice. Independence, the need for individuality. You see that in different groups of teenagers especially, where they're all trying to look different, and in the process of trying to look different, they all look the same. Order, the need for organized, stable, predictable environments. Physical activity, the need for movement or exercise. Power, the need for influence of will. Romance, the need for sex and beauty, to feel loved and supported. Saving, the need to collect. Have you ever seen hoarders on TV? Some people apparently go a little overboard with that. Social contact, the need for friends or peer relationships. Social status, tranquility, the need to feel safe. And sometimes vengeance, the need to strike back and to compete. So these are different reasons that people are motivated to do certain things. So you've got to figure out what you're trying to motivate people to do. Is it to accept your proposal for your thesis? Is it to get them to give you a job? Is it to get a grant that you would like funding for? Is it to show somebody that you have done some sort of scientific study proving something to be valuable? What is it you're trying to get them to do or to believe or to feel? And how do you get there? So there are different models of looking at persuasion. When I break that down, what I mean by that is how attitudes are formed and when they are going to be predictive of a behavior set. So just because I feel like, here's a perfect example for me. Okay, so we know I had a little guy, and I still have a little pooch right here. I believe strongly that a diet and health are very, very important. I have a positive attitude towards being healthy and losing some weight. Does that mean, since I have a positive attitude about it, and I believe that's something I should do, does that mean I'm going to do it? Not on its own. So there are other components of that I have to figure out. For example, perceived behavioral control. Do I perceive that I am capable and able of doing that? Have I tried it 10 times before, and so I kind of feel like, why bother? So you have to have an attitude towards whatever the behavior is, positive or negative. You also have to have the belief that you can be successful at it. And then there's a lot of other external motivations as well, cultural considerations and different things that will potentially impact whether you actually behave in a way that matches what your attitude is. The one on the board is looking at a model for persuasion. It's dual routes. What that means is one of them is central, the other is peripheral. The one on the top is central, the one on the bottom is peripheral. What happens there is, I love this, people get a message of any sort, any field. Some people are interested in the topic. They're, for whatever reason, motivated to pay attention, which is whenever a ton of motivations. So they go the central route. What that means is they are highly motivated and able to think about the message. If they're not able to comprehend the age or any other kind of impact, if they're not able to do it, they can't really go that route and be successful at it. But if they are able to comprehend it and highly motivated, they're going to think cognitively. They're going to really think through the message and what is being said. They're going to evaluate every last part of your argument. They're going to look at you. They're going to listen to what your supporting evidence is. What happens then is the individual is going to start deeply processing, really thinking through it. They're focused on the quality of the message and the arguments. So they're really paying attention. But the best part about that is when people are paying attention because you are meeting their motivational needs, it's a lasting change that resists fading and counterattacks. What that means is you have taken their attitude, you have strengthened it from wherever it was previously. Because they've met that cognitive demand and they've really thought through it, they have now formed a fairly solid attitude about it, and it's going to be something that they remember in their long-term memory. So whatever that message is, you've met their needs, they've listened to it, and it's lasting. And people are going to have a hard time persuading them against what you just did because they had all the information you need. The flip side of that is the heuristic side. On the bottom part, this is what happens if the commercials are on, or if you could care less what the professor's talking about in front of the room. You're not motivated, and I'm sure everybody has been there at some point, whether it's exam week, or you're tired, you didn't get any sleep, or whatever has gotten you to that point. You are not motivated, or you don't have the ability to think about a message. You go on the bottom route. So either the speaker hasn't caught your attention, hasn't motivated you, hasn't done what they need to do. What happens then is a superficial processing. You're just focused on surface features, maybe the person's hair, or what they're wearing, or whether they have makeup on, or they have a great hat, or a nice tie. Features such as a communicator's attractiveness, or even the number of arguments presented. It might not be, you're watching Donald Trump and you don't really listen that carefully, you're just curious, and so you're listening for the number of arguments that are said, and you're looking at what he's wearing and people's responses. Versus you are listening and you're really thinking through it, you're interested in the arguments being made. You might go seek out other sources and say, okay, well, what are the stances on each of these items? That's the person on the top. The unfortunate part about if you can't get somebody motivated to listen to you, and they're on the bottom, it's very temporary. If they actually do form an attitude based on the heuristic approach, it's very temporary. It's something that they haven't thought through, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm kind of neutral, and somebody else can persuade them the opposite very easily. So you have not been successful. It's a very temporary change, and they are susceptible to fading and counterattacks. And that's huge for conflict resolution or something like that. If you feel like you made a difference, but you didn't really motivate them in the process, then what happens is, okay, you made great stay-away, or you may think you did because they had a slight shift, but somebody else can come along very quickly and easily and break apart all the work that you just did. One other point that I'd like to make is a study that was started in 1982 is the need for cognition. These are people, like probably most of you, or you wouldn't be sitting in here, that have a lot of need to know or need for cognition. They want evidence. They actually want information. They enjoy collecting and learning and gathering information. And so people that have a high need to know are especially prone to be on the cognitive demand. If you don't meet that, you've lost them. Yes?
How do you judge the audience effectively if they are those type of people that maybe you aren't meeting that demand and you're losing them? How do you adjust?
And that is absolutely a point that we want to make. People that are not paying any attention in your audience, one of the ways to do it is to, okay, if you see them kind of losing, it might just be that they're tired or something like that, you're not engaging. Sometimes it's proximity, it's literally just working your way around the room. Sometimes it's engaging them and intentionally asking them a question, or just getting them involved in that dialogue. What's happening there is you're getting their attention. There's a social obligation where they feel like they should listen to what you're having to say. So if I'm coming up to you and having this dialogue, it's social polite and social etiquette that you would then talk to me and pay attention. And then for the rest of the time, your assumption is, hey, she might come back to me. I better pay attention. Not that you were paying plenty of attention. But so there's different strategies to do that. Proximity, like I said, is definitely one. Engaging them in conversation. The second part of that portion right there is if you start talking to them and engaging with them, is that you can find out what their perspective is. So perhaps in that quick dialogue, you can find out what their motivation is, what they are getting or not getting from what you're saying. Maybe they just don't understand, and you need to restate how you said something. Maybe they need some examples. If you can talk to them and find out how they relate to your discussion, then you can start tailoring it a lot more. But like right now, I see lots of people taking notes or looking like making eye contact, they're looking up there. So you know when you have an engaged audience. Doesn't mean they're interested. Maybe they're drawing pictures for them. but those are some of the ways. So this is where your message comes, and on the very top is exposure, actually presenting the information, giving some sort of information out. You're doing a presentation of any sort, whether that's written or verbal. That's the easiest thing to do, is just presenting the information. It's a little bit more difficult to get their attention and make them aware, because presenting it only gets you so far. They have to be aware of it, getting their attention, getting their motivation. Next one is, on top of awareness and attention, getting them to comprehend and understand the message. It just begins to get a little more difficult. Getting them to accept what you're having to say, and then retain it. This is where you have to meet their motivation, or they're not going to retain the information you are sharing with them. And the most difficult thing to do is action. Okay, I know I need to lose a couple pounds. What's going to get me to act? Okay, I've got the motivation. I know it's a good thing. Maybe the doctor says, hey, you really should, what is going to get me to actually act? And same with you, and whatever you're trying to get somebody to do on your behalf, that is the most difficult thing, is the call to action. So to use these appeals effectively, you of course need to gather information about your audience, which is what he was just saying. Be audience-centered. Determine your basic information that you need to get across. Make your decisions before you speak, having that outline or having some sort of prepared document so that you can look back at it and make sure that once you know your stuff inside out and backwards, if you need to tailor to your audience and shift, it's easier to do that. You're not going to lose track if somebody asks a question. You're not going to be off way off the deep end. Yes?
You might be getting to this in the public speaking part of what's coming. There's techniques for doing each of these in speaking, right? So are we going to get...
Yes, that's right after this slide, so let's go ahead. Being aware of the audience responses during the speech, which is exactly what we were just talking about. Okay, so here's some of the techniques and tactics, the logos, ethos, and pathos. Logos is logic, or the logical appeal. Persuading by the use of reasoning. You have to avoid certainly fallacies. I gave you a list that I got offline, but of several different fallacies that people do accidentally use when they're speaking. But for example, in Inconvenient Truth, what he's doing is he's got a background, some credibility already built. He's trying to use actual data and supporting evidence to what he's saying. So he's getting that appeal. He's meeting the need for cognition by showing visuals. One of the things about it, though, is it has to be somewhat simplified visuals. If it's so complex that people have to really spend a lot of time cognitive command looking at it, you're going to lose a good percentage of people. So if you are speaking to a group of individuals that are scientists or whatever else, maybe knowing their education level or what their background is, you can certainly give them more complex information. But you have to, when you're going to the mass audiences, figure out how you're going to say it. So, conflict resolution, you may know exactly what's going on, or in medical, or anything like that. You are going to have a better understanding of different things. How do you bring it down to their level? So you're meeting their need for cognition. You're giving them enough statistics, enough facts, enough supporting evidence, but also doing it in a way that they can understand and grasp it. Sometimes the way you do it is by showing a chart, but then having a key on the bottom that kind of explains it, so that the people that don't need that key, or might not look at that, they're going to look at it, interpret the results themselves. But then the people that aren't quite to that knowledge are able to then look at it and understand and interpret. Also keeping in mind language barriers as well. When you're doing something like this, graphically, people can understand information, even if they can't understand necessarily all of the details of what you're saying. Show them numbers, show them a chart, they get it. Do you have a question?
Can you pause for 30 seconds?
Sure.
I'm putting these on